Okay. Well, welcome. So I'm Dr. Chelsea Haig. Here's another person. Welcome. Welcome. I'm Dr. Chelsea Haig, and this is my mom.
I'm Dr. Robin Haig. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, so we are a double PhD mother-daughter team, and we're so glad to be here with you today. We run Positive Parenthood. I suspect that there will be pinging and people coming in and out. So don't let that, people kind of coming in and out. So don't let that bug you too much. We're here tonight to talk about what really matters for real littles. You guys are all parenting kids. It sounds like most of you who are here are parenting kids who are 2 and under. I suspect that there'll be some people who are parenting slightly older children coming. In terms of Positive Parenthood, we are a relationship-based organization, and we work with parents in courses and coaching and community to to create cooperation and calm and decrease challenge at home. So I will let you introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce myself, and then we'll just jump in.
Great. So as I said, my name is Dr. Robin Haig, and I'm a speech language pathologist in training and have done a lot of work over the years with parent education.
Wait, sorry, you're not in training. That is your training.
Yes, by training, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I've done a lot of work with parents over the years on supporting early communication efforts, and from that really developed this interest in how to support families with helping their young children cooperate, and how to support families in remaining calm when children kind of provoke some of our intrinsic angst. So from my perspective, so much of this comes back to how we talk to other people, how we talk to children, how do we talk to parents, and how do we support each other and expect that each one is honestly and organically doing the best he or she can in that moment, but there may be some information they don't have, and that's what's thrown things out of kilter.
Yeah, so I got involved with Positive Parenthood several years ago now, or a couple of years ago now. I was a professor of social emotional learning, and I had 3 under 2. So I just feel you all, who, especially our twin family on here. And I think there's another family with 2 that are very close in age. And what happened is that I certainly knew all the theories and had the expertise. And when it came to helping my children resolve simple things like who gets to use the purple spoon and who has to use the green spoon, it was just a really big challenge. And so I took this course, and we became involved with working on this together, and that was a couple of years ago, and now we run this program together. So that's a little bit about who we are when we think about what really matters for your little ones. And I want to hear in just a second where each of you is coming from. But some of the things that sort of came to mind as I thought about your littles and my littles, right? All the littles that we're raising right now in this pandemic parenting moment. Good development, relationship, agency, praise, movement, struggle. Even some amount of struggle is important, right? Language, we're going to talk about positive opposites. There's so much that's important. And so as we move into this time together, I would love for you to open your chat. And if you're watching the replay, I'm sorry, you could think about this in your mind. I would love you to open the chat and just share with us what a challenge has been for you parenting your little one. What a challenge, and you can maybe add your child's age in parentheses. And I would also love to hear something that's working really well. So 2 things, if you can put both of those things in the chat, I would love to see sort of where people are. So I'll give you a second to think about both a challenge and something that's kind of tricky, and to type it into the chat. And we've got a couple people on phones. So if you are one of those people, no worries. As also the parent of some real littles, I can probably name many of your challenges. Do you have any brave souls who wants to share? I know one for me has historically been helping my children share, has been a big issue, helping them sort of play together. We've got one family that foster adoptive parents to 5 kids. Okay, so this is another, we've got 2 twin families on here, or it looks that way at least, 8, 7, 7, 2, and 1. So certainly this will be more focused on your 2 and 1-year-olds, but you know, you'll be able to, you can use these tools kind of across the lifespan. So you can definitely use them with the bigs too. Yeah, so hitting, I think probably a lot of people have that experience, really common. That's a stress behavior, and we're going to talk about stress in just a minute. Transitioning. Yeah, I can see lots of heads nodding. Transitions can be tricky, right? Not bribing him to get from one place to another. Yeah, it's pretty exhausting if you're like always having to give one M&M to complete something. Bedtime struggles. Yeah, I think these are really common things for those of us who have really young children. And certainly we're going to talk today about 2 of the tools that you can put in place to sort of soothe that right away. You know, you can start tomorrow or tonight if they're still awake. I hope they're not, but
They might be.
They could be, you know, sometimes they go to bed really late. Yeah, starting to talk about emotions. It's great. Mindfulness tools, really good social emotional sort of awareness piece to start working on with your littles. So if you haven't shared, please feel welcome to in the chat so we know who you are and what's kind of going on. And why don't we just jump right in, and you, Mom, can start by talking about why stress is really important in this, and then we'll talk about co-regulation.
Yeah. So, stress is a big word, and it's something, you're getting to experience in a new way, probably in a more intense way than previously in your life. Because in reality, we're in a pandemic, and that by itself has brought all of us a good amount of stress. So I want you to, though, take a deeper understanding of the word stress and anything that gets in the way of your child cooperating with you and doing what you've asked, whether it's getting into the bathtub, whether it's going from point A to point B in the home, whether it's picking up toys, anything that gets in the way of the child cooperating is related to stress. And it may be a different kind of stress, right? You may be thinking it's not so hard for you just to get up and let's walk out to the car right now. We have to go to grandma's house. And from your perspective, that should be a really sweet, easy transition. But from your child's perspective, it may be leaving behind some favorite toys that he likes, imagining that he's going into a place that sometimes is boring because the adults spend too much time talking. And so we want to think about what is the right reaction to stress. And there are many reactions to stress. Sometimes we go out and garden, we go for a run, we go for a walk, right? Those are all ways of moving away from connection. But what's important for our children, and even for us as adults, is that we find ways to stay connected, right? So that we teach the child that you can be frustrated, you can be angry, you can be mad, you can be happy, and you can stay connected to me. And I'm going to safely absorb those various feelings while keeping you safe. And that's the important thing, is that we teach our littles that I will co-regulate. And we'll talk about what regulation is through all of these various emotional states that you might have that are related to a stress response for the child, and sometimes a stress response from the parent in response to the stress from the child.
Yeah, so we've sort of started talking a little bit about co-regulation, and I see there's some questions in the chat that we will definitely get to. We'll have a little bit of time at the end. I think we're just talking about challenges still, and there's some that I think we should definitely talk about, one being food. I think that's a really common issue. So we can talk about that. So when we think about regulation, what we're talking about is sort of the state of being of you and your child. Now, you might have heard about it as like organization, well-organized, disorganized. You might have heard people talk about well-regulated, dysregulated, and what they're really talking about is sort of what is the emotional landscape, what is the tenor of the relationship or of the child. I like to think about a good state of regulation being like an oak tree, like really rooted, able to sway in the wind, branches are not breaking. And many of our children sometimes aren't well regulated, right? So they may be rooted, but their branches may break. Or maybe they're not rooted and there's a little bit of wind and the roots wash up, right? So there's a real lack of flexibility when kids are dysregulated. And what we're looking for when we think about regulation is flexibility and stability. When we think about co-regulation, we're talking about what you and your child are sharing, right? So if you think about a family or a parent and a child, your children are hardwired to sort of read you and take on your emotional state. So you will know this if you've ever had an experience like this, like pre-pandemic when you maybe like worked outside the home or something crazy like that, right? Maybe you have a really rough day and then you come home and you're like, just give me 2 hours. There's only 2 hours till bedtime. Like, let's just be good for 2 hours. And then it's the worst possible night, right? The kids fight, they throw food on the floor, there's a tantrum at bedtime, like everything just goes wrong. And they're co-regulating with you, right? They're reading and feeling your stress left over from your day, whatever happened, and expressing it back to you in the way that they're behaving. So when we think about co-regulation and parenting with co-regulation sort of in mind, it means the adult takes an increased responsibility for the emotional landscape. And I want to be careful to say, like, it's not as though it's all your fault if your child is having a tricky time, right? Some children are genuinely harder than other kids, and some kids need stronger co-regulation partners, right? And so when you parent this way, it's really taking an increased responsibility for sort of the feeling, the tenor, what it feels like in the relationship in your family and your home. Anything to add about co-regulation?
Nope, I think that was beautiful.
Okay. Go to the next slide.
Okay. So, and I know we have somebody in the chat thinking about food anxieties, and we will be thinking about how the couple of tools we give to you can make a difference. And probably all of you have heard about praise, and some of you may even think that praise means saying good job. And I want to just remember that we have young children in the room, and even 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds, and none of them have a job. And so good job doesn't mean anything. If you say it with the right sort of sing song in your voice, it can be received as a positive by your child. But I think about praise as my strongest parenting tool. And I'm going to say that the highest form of praise is that I'm giving to the child me, my presence. And so I think of praise and presence as being one and the same thing. There is some research that guides us not to praise an underlying characteristic of the child. You're the best artist, you're the fastest runner, you're the smartest kid, you're the most beautiful in the room. That kind of praise is not useful for a child and actually can backfire on us. But the praise that comes along with presence is noticing the work and the effort that the child is doing. Wow, you got 6 blocks to stack up today. Whew, that's a bunch, right? So it's really feeling the child feeling your positive emotional energy. In order for your presence or your praise to be meaningful to the child, it has to be frequent. And I know I tell parents sometimes that frequent means, that we're talking about 100 times a day, or I smile and sometimes I'll say, or 100 times an hour, right? If this is an hour that I'm connected to that child, I can easily deliver praise at 100 times in an hour, easily, right? Because I'm connecting to the child in that moment. Praise, in order to be felt by the child, has to be effusive, and it might be softly effusive for some children, or it might be big and effusive for other children. But that effusiveness has to be, sort of paired with an authenticity, so that when I'm saying something to the child about, wow, Chelsea, I like the way you brushed your hair. It's combed and you have a part. And you can see what Chelsea's doing. She's turning red. I've embarrassed her. And she's thinking, what the heck? That doesn't make any sense at all. So just as Chelsea is highly sensitive to inauthentic praise, Our children are also highly sensitive to it, all of our children. So I want you to be thinking about praising something, being present for something, connecting around something that matters. Not, wow, you combed your hair. Well, so what? I comb my hair every day, right? It still looks like this. Another thing about praise, Chelsea's just having fun today, about praise and presence is that it needs to be specific. And so the piece about good job is number one, children don't have jobs. And number two, it's not specific. So if I instead notice, wow, you've got your shoe on all by yourself. Did you notice your shoes were on in 1 minute? Got it, right? Score, right? So there's lots of ways, but I want to be specific about what did the child just do that is harder for my child. So if my child can get up and get his shoes on every day, I don't need to praise that. That's like praising Chelsea for combing her hair. But if my child has a challenge with something and they're doing it sometimes, but not all of the time, I can use praise as a way to sort of increase the number of times my child will use that behavior. Now we talk about praise as being presence and that it's immediate and delivered in close proximity. Now I'll tell you why on the close proximity. The immediate is based on research, right? It has to be within 10 to 15 seconds of whatever the act is that you want to praise, or else the child's not going to make the connection. It's lost. It's just empty words at that point. And the important thing about it being in close proximity, and I always say close proximity means I can touch, right? If I can't touch, I'm not close enough. Because when I deliver praise to a child through my presence, I want to seal it with touch. So whether it's a pat on the back, like, yeah, you got it, whether it's a thumbs up or a fist bump, whatever it might be, or whether it's a kiss on the forehead or a side hug, I don't want to stop the child from doing what he's doing in that moment. If he's cleaning up toys and I'm giving him praise for that, because it doesn't usually happen, I want to be specific, but I don't want to stop him from cleaning up toys. So I want to keep that going. So my praise might just be a, whoa, you got it. All toys are in the basket. So it can be lots of different things, but I have to be close in order to do that. And if I'm not close enough, I'm not delivering praise and presence. So when families come back to me after going through one of our courses or one of our programs, and they say, gosh, we're having a hard time again, I always go back to this because it's so easy as adults to be lost in our adult life and not to really be able to take the time to really connect with our presence to our children. And in reality, our children need far more of us in order to do things that for the child are difficult to do.
Yeah, so I would love to just hear a little bit about, and you can either unmute yourself in a minute or you can let us know in the chat about where you can see using this tool in your own life. So knowing that praise is your strongest tool, presence is the highest form of praise. And I know sometimes it might sound like, I do praise my kid. That's like kind of common sense. And I think that what we find is that when you really focus on praise, most of us, and I'll include myself here, realize I thought I was praising my kid. Actually, I wasn't very much. Okay, so I really encourage you to think about where you want to apply this, and I would pick. You could pick a time or an activity to really focus on praise for. We talked a little bit about how it can sound, and here's just some examples. And you'll notice that some of these examples are words. So like, what a strong swimmer you're becoming. And others are like shining eyes and thumbs up, right? So you get to adjust to your own child. Like, what do they respond well to? But in all of the cases, really focusing on praising things that your child is working on and being really specific about the effort that they're sort of exuding, right? And we know from research that we want to really focus on where children are trying. And then we also have presence here, right? So the highest form of praise is to say to your child, yeah, you're worthy of my time and attention, and I'm just here with you, even if it's only for 5 minutes. Without answering my phone or having intrusive thoughts about my email or checking my email or checking the laundry or whatever. So I would really encourage you, and I'll check the chat now. I would love to hear about the sorts of situations and moments where you imagine layering praise. And I think for many of you who have these kids who are really little, it's like getting dressed. I mean, you don't have to do anything extraordinary. Getting dressed, doing sort of everyday things.
I love this one Diane
Yeah.
put here. She noted that when her children can problem solve on their own and then present their emotions instead of tantrums or behaviors. And that's a really hard task for a child, right? To move from using behavior as a way to regulate to using words. And it really shows a lot of capacity on the part of your children to reflect on what just happened, to hold the emotion that they have in mind, and then to come back and talk about it. And I just want to share, Diane, I know there are a lot of adults that can't do that, right? And so indeed, when we have a child that has that as an emerging skill, being able to talk about a tricky situation. My brother just took my favorite blank and I was really frustrated. I wanted to grab it back. I'm bigger. I can do that. But instead I said, I am mad. That's mine. Give it back, please. And when he didn't, instead of hitting him, I came to talk to you, Mom. So that he's problem solving, right? He's thinking about it. He's inhibiting the behavior that he might use organically. And he's using a language response, which is really, really beautiful to share the emotions. And over time, we want to help the child who is the one that is the offending child hear the way it made the sibling feel and be able to share back a heartfelt emotional response to that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is a different tool. So we're giving you two tools and then we'll just open it up for conversation. Praise being your strongest one. And the next one is a language-based tool. And so when we think about this, I want to sort of preface this by saying that your children who are, I think everybody here's got toddlers, right? Oops, I know what the tool's called.
It's okay.
I did it again. That your toddlers, your real littles, your ones and twos, don't yet understand the concept of no, not, don't. So that's a pretty advanced concept. And I think a lot of people will say, yeah, they do. I tell them stop doing X, Y, and Z, or don't hit your brother, or I don't know, don't run into the street, and they don't do it. And I think what we want to say to you is they probably understand your tone, right? Your tone changes when you're like, don't run into the street, stop hitting your brother. And that's what they're responding to more than the language piece of stop hitting your brother or it's not time for whatever. It's not okay to run into the street. And so one way to test this, if you are sort of like, I'm not really sure that this is true, is to take two objects that are this different colors, but the same thing, like a blue crayon and a red crayon or a blue spoon and a red spoon, and say to your toddler,
if they know their colors.
Yeah, right. So if they don't know their colors, pick something else. But if they do know their colors, you could say to them, give me the one that is not red. And most of your littles are going to give you the red one every time. And then you'll know just developmentally where they are. And for me, at least, when I remember trying that with my kids when they were quite young, it gave me a real reason to lean into this next tool. And it also helped me recognize, though I thought I was often calm, that much of the time my children were actually responding to my tone. And I wanted to shift that, right? So that they were responding more to my language. So what you say matters, but in this case, really how you say it is the really important part, especially because your littles are, they're learning to talk. They're listening to language, they're immersed in language. And what we want for our toddlers is to be able to engage in language.
Yeah. So This is why we have the tool called positive opposites. So I encourage all of you, you probably I know some of the 2-year-olds will have a child that doesn't know color yet, but they probably know things like car versus cup.
Yeah.
Or car versus pencil. And so just take 2 items that you know that they know what they are and say, give me the one that's not blank. And you're going to find that's the one you get, which tells you that they don't understand the word not. And I also know about young children for much of their lives, lots of years ahead, they need to be taught how to interact and how to behave. And so, from my perspective, when a child behaves poorly, he doesn't transition, he doesn't eat the right food, he doesn't go to bed when you tell him to, he doesn't put his toys away, I say, okay, he needs more help learning how to follow these rules. He doesn't get it. So, when I teach something to someone, I have to keep the anxiety down, which means I have to monitor myself and stay regulated myself. And I have to tell the child what to do. And so when we use a positive opposite, I'm actually telling the child what to do in that moment instead of having the child respond to my tone, which gets kind of tense and angry when I yell across the room, don't touch the light socket, right? You're going to start a fire. You're going to burn your fingers. So when you scream at a child, you get one response. And when you use a positive opposite, you're teaching your child what to do. So the positive opposite promotes what we consider pro-social behaviors, and that is teaching a child how to behave in socially appropriate ways. What is the right thing to do here, right? It's also clear. So if they're picking up something to throw it, let's just say I'm going to throw my pen, and Chelsea was going to help me, she would say, oh, pen stays on the table. And you see how I have that nice response? She might have even helped me kind of lower my hand to put that pen back on the table. And then I'm learning that's where pens go, right? I'm getting the right information about what I should be doing with that pen. And trust me, as somebody who's worked with young children with a variety of different profiles and different personality characteristics and different neurodevelopmental characteristics, when you work with children all day long, if you're constantly in this state of dysregulation yourself, because there's this sense that my 2 or 3-year-old is doing this deliberately to make me angry, I'm exhausted at the end of the day. If I'm using positive opposites and I'm just thinking, okay, my child needs to know a little more about something, I need to help him with this, I feel different. I don't feel stressed. I don't feel angry. And it allows me, that regulation in me, allows me to be stable and flexible in the response to my child. So if I see my first direction doesn't go well, it's okay. I've got other tools in my back pocket. I've got lots of ways to support the child without ever moving into sort of an anxious response myself that demonstrates I'm not flexible or stable. Sometimes I smile when we see, as part of our course, parents, send in videos, and we see in the video that the parent is behaving in the way they're saying the child is behaving, because the parent is screaming and not being flexible, and doing some of these things that they're accusing the child of. And remember, the child is a child, and he needs your help as the parent to help him know and understand what is the appropriate behavior there.
Yeah. So when you think about positive opposites, sometimes people will say, oh, this, it's sort of like praise, like, okay, that seems like common sense, right? And I actually think it's like a pretty big shift to make in your language. And I think you will find if you go out over the next couple of days and decide that you're going to get no, not, and don't out of your language, which I would certainly encourage you to try. You might realize how often you say no, not, and don't, and stop. And so it can feel kind of weird in your mouth, right? When you first, it's like, oh, that's a weird thing to say. But I encourage you just to play with it and to try it for a while so that you sort of get used to it. Yeah. So some of the ways that it might sound, some of the things that you can say, a lot of people will say, stop hitting, or don't hit, or hands are not for hitting. And, probably better would be just something like hands on your own body.
Notice the smile that she says that with, right? There's a tone to that that's not really accusatory toward the child. And that's what's really important. And that's what allows the child to join and cooperate. It's the smile.
Right. I don't even have a kid here. Um, so, you know, took my children the other day to the craft store to buy some things for a kindergarten project. And as we walked through this craft store, there is just a lot of toys. Little stuffies on like those little tall things, like little sparkly things, all kinds of things that they wanted. It's like one child who was like, can I have this? Can I have that? Can I have this? And that can happen too, like at a checkout aisle, right? Like you're checking out at the grocery store. It's like candy, candy. I want this. I want that. Blah blah blah. And most of us, that like makes us really stressed out because it's tense. It's public. Somebody's probably watching, judging. And so I want you to think about like, okay, what would the positive opposite be? And for us in the craft store was toys are for looking. Sounds really weird. Also, it was fine. Like they did a respond to that. Then it's like, okay, toys are for looking, right? So we did look at the toys. We even took a picture of some of them.
And you can even, once your child hears your language like this, you can even say, toys are just for, and let them fill it in. And the child will respond. They'll fill it in because they've heard it and then they know. And really what our kids are looking for is clarity. What's supposed to happen now? They're looking for information and you provided it.
So much clearer. So don't splash water out of the bathtub. I'm sure that everybody on this call has had a child get in the water everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Water stays in the tub, right? And what would you do if your child continued to splash water out of the tub?
Well, I've had that experience. And, it's really easy to solve by just pulling the plug or letting the water drain out. If I have a real little and I'm concerned that lots of water is coming out, I might just say, oh, bath time's finished. Here we go. Smile on my face. I could pick them up and put them out. They might come out crying and kicking, which I'm going to ignore in that moment. And there you go. Now you've got your towel. You're ready to get your jammies on. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. And just move forward as if I don't have a child who's really angry with me.
Yeah, so it kind of is about see how it's about co-regulation, right? It's about the tenor, the feeling of the thing. And this is one way that you can sort of hack that, right? By using this kind of language structure, it's going to make it easier to keep the emotional landscape calmer, more patient. And when it feels calmer and more patient and you feel like you're more in control, your child is going to do better. So for those of you who have a couple of real little kids, I know sometimes you'll be playing with them and it's like, stop grabbing, like stop pulling that out of your sister's hands, especially if you've got one who's a little older than the other one and the big one's like pulling all the stuff away from the little one. And sometimes it's like, okay, what's the positive opposite for stop grabbing?
Well, you have to realize that your child in that moment, he doesn't know how to hold his impulse and he wants that toy. So your child needs more of you, presence. Right? We need to be there for that praise piece. So getting between the child with the desired toy and the child who has not got the toy in hand and say, hey, I'll wait with you. You can be next. Right? And again, it's with this big smile, like, it's okay. Life's not over. You're next.
It's also with like attuning to what your child actually needs. Like, why are they actually grabbing? And they're grabbing because they want the thing. Right? And that's okay. And you're going to get in there and help them wait, which is hard, which is why I said help them wait. No more cookies, or you can't have that, or we're done, we can't have any more cookies. Like you've already had all the cookies. It's just like cookies are all done. Or you could go for time for carrots. Or I just made that up. I mean, whatever, it's time for a different food option. It feels easier, right? Both for you and for your child. And that's gonna, that feeling for both of you is gonna make it a lot easier.
All right. So one of the things I want to think about is that, parenting is a challenge that you're all facing. It's not something that comes with an easy manual, and some of you probably have read some of the manuals, and it's still tricky. But I want to say that, parenting in this way through co-regulation is really about taking care of you, because over time, this methodology will help you recognize that your child's not trying to make you mad, which sometimes we do get mad. And you can understand it from the child's perspective that the child's having a hard time. And sometimes I can say to my child, "Ooh, mommy's having a hard time right now. I'm going to take a minute. I'll be right back." Right? So I teach the child how to take care of myself. How do I do it when I get stressed, so that over time that he or she will be able to do the same. So I want to say, with all parenting, don't forget time for yourself, to nurture yourself, to think about what's important for you, what supports your regulation, what supports you in staying well rested. And I know most parents are not well rested right now, especially if you've got your children on Zoom and you're trying to work at the same time. It's not an easy thing. So just look for those little tiny moments where you can sneak in a mommy or a daddy moment to really take care of yourself, and know that this type of parenting can feel big at the beginning, because it's probably very different than what you're currently doing, but will be much easier over the course of time.
Yeah, so I just want to say a couple of things and then open it up for questions. I think this way of parenting is a lot different. And it may be that you're like, oh, I've been trying to do that, and it's not working. And I think that's what a lot of parents say. And that is why when we work with people in courses or coaching, we invite folks to submit videos every week of themselves practicing the tools. And most of the time, it's the case that, a small change in how you're saying something, or in your position, or in the way that you're approaching your child, or in the environment, it's a small change that has like a big impact. So just also wanting to invite you into those courses that are coming up this month. There's one for real littles that will all be filled up with people who are parenting kids birth to 5. They're all on Zoom. That birth to 5 class is Thursday evenings. Of course, if you have a couple birth to 5s and a bigger kid, it's all welcome. And then we have a Wednesday evening course that is launching a couple weeks after that. That's good for like kids who are 2 to 10-ish range. I don't think anyone here has them, but we also have people who, have teens, and we have classes for that. Sometimes people will say, I can't do a course. I just want to have access to the tools. And sometimes that can work. I think being in community and getting actual direct specific feedback to your parenting and your child is really, really important. So if you're thinking about one of those, I want to encourage you to think about doing it in community, in one of the signature courses, or in one-to-one coaching if you, if that is something that you want.
The other thing I'll say is, if you could just read a book about how to better parent your child, you probably would have already found that success, because there's so many books on the market. But I think, having run this course, for 20 plus years, what I can say about the families that have come through it, it's by really, looking at and reflecting on your parenting interactions that allows them to improve. So I encourage you, if you're able to take one of these next steps, to really think about how to better parent your child.
So I want to just open it up for any questions. We are a teeny tiny group. There's only 4 of us here. So I just want to open it up and hear what your questions are. If you have any, you are welcome to either pop it in the chat or to just unmute yourself and share. We've got a little bit of 10 or so minutes to answer those questions. Maybe we want to actually start with the food concern question. Do you want to speak to that one?
Mm-hmm. So one of the families noted that they have a child who has some food anxiety, and how to teach and reward without using food rewards. So there's a lot of research about the use of food rewards, especially with young children, and even more especially with girls. And so what I would caution all of you about is to provide the right choices in your home of foods that are healthy and that are appropriate, so that what's in your home can be eaten by your child when your child is hungry. Because really what we're trying to teach our kids is that when you're hungry, get something to eat, right? And these are the kinds of things that are here, and these are all things that are good. I know that, unless there's a medical reason for concern, so if your pediatrician has said, gosh, your child has to eat, so many calories on a given day, that's a different situation, and always follow that medical advice. But for most of our kids, getting into battles around food is not our best option. And so for the mom that asked this question, it sounds like the issue is wanting to teach her child and to reinforce her child for doing something, and they've gotten into a pattern of reinforcement paired with a reward of some kind of food item. And I don't know if it's a sugar item, but most often those are the food items that get paired there. And what I would encourage you guys to think about is that, food should never be a reinforcer. I work with a lot of different kinds of children with special needs and typically developing. And, really we want the reinforcer to be the person, right? So you are the reinforcer, because we know that presence is the highest form of praise. And so when we teach a child that we are the reinforcers, the people that the child lives with, what we give them doesn't matter, right? It could be a coffee stirrer. It could be an envelope, right? It could be anything. It doesn't really matter. And in fact, I don't have to give them anything except my time, right?
It goes back to presence and praise.
Yeah. So I, from my perspective, I don't get into food battles. I had two children, Chelsea, who was easy to feed, and then her younger brother, who had a lot of early feeding issues, and in fact would go literally, honestly, 2 days, sometimes 3, without eating more than a half of an apple and drinking. He drank plenty of water. He didn't drink milk. And I went to the pediatrician at one point and I said, he's driving me crazy. I don't know what to do. I can't get him to eat. And she said, let it go. And I kind of looked at her like, let it go. And that was her response to me. And that really was the most effective response. Because once I stopped, he was a little over 2 at the time. When I stopped making it a battleground, he eventually started eating like a regular person. But it didn't actually happen for our son until he was probably 8 or 9. And prior to that time, he would literally eat virtually nothing for a couple of days. And then he would eat like a grown man for the next couple of days. And then he would go through a couple more days of not eating. But he was growing. Everything was fine nutritionally. We had him all checked out by a dietitian, by his pediatrician. Everything was fine. And her response was that food is a really hard battleground to get out of. And I really, I've seen that develop for so many families over time. And so if you have a child who only eats mashed potatoes and that's what you're serving, they might have 7 scoops of mashed potatoes. It's not the end of the world unless there's a problem, right? And I can say for many years, my son he liked the white turkey meat. That was the kind he liked, and that was all that would be on his plate at Thanksgiving. And we'd smile and say, okay, there's more for the rest of us, right? Didn't have to be a battle. And, he's an adult and he's fine and he eats healthy and no problems as an adult. So food battles are something that happen often with young children. And it's because we pick up the other side of it and start pulling on it, make it into a battle. And I always say to parents, choose your victories, choose what's important. And if your pediatrician isn't concerned about the child's diet, don't make it a battleground.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really significant pieces when we work together over time that we really focus on is how do we get off of the battleground? Because there's no reason to be on it.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to wrap up now, unless there's any other questions. It's been really wonderful to be together. For those of you who are thinking about food, there is a whole workshop on food and mealtime that is free on the website. So you can go to the website, positiveparenthood.org, and look under free resources and have access to that. And, moving forward, I hope you're all in our Facebook group, and we'd love to see you in any of those upcoming courses. Feel free to schedule a consult, the complimentary consult, to see if you're sort of wondering, is this the right thing for me? I'll send out a link to do that when we send out a follow-up email. It was wonderful to be with you tonight.
Have a great evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.